So when I do that, do you get a little pop-up and then you have to say that you accept it and all that stuff? Okay, cool. So our special guest today, of course, is Roger, and it sounds like he has a true abundance of things to share with us. So we are going back and forth discussing time, and it sounds like really I have that tickly feeling in my skin that I'm excited because of the wealth of the work that he's done. So to kind of put us on the on-ramp to get there, we open up generally for updates, and there's two update departments that I want to start with. One is I have a number of things that are kind of unfolding through the Self-Leadership Collaborative that I want to update you on so that you know what's unfolding, and also so you can jump on board with any and all the elements that interest you. And then also there's a specific update that I want to invite Teresa to share. Teresa, could I invite you to go first? And then I'm going to come in after you. So when I do that, do you get a little pop-up and then you have to say that you accept it and all that stuff? Okay, cool. So our special guest today, of course, is Roger, and it sounds like he has a true abundance of things to share with us. So we are going back and forth discussing time, and it sounds like really I have that tickly feeling in my skin that I'm excited because of the wealth of the work that he's done. So to kind of put us on the on-ramp to get there, we open up generally for updates, and there's two update departments that I want to start with. One is I have a number of things that are kind of unfolding through the Self-Leadership Collaborative that I want to update you on so that you know what's unfolding, and also so you can jump on board with any and all the elements that interest you. And then also there's a specific update that I want to invite Teresa to share. Teresa, could I invite you to go first? And then I'm going to come in after you.
And so, yeah, nice job.
That means so much to me, Tim. Thank you so much. I was just sifting through papers and running across the exercises you designed. You guys are all in the mix. Tim, I think I have to say the person who was in on this before you was my mother.
Oh. Sorry, Margaret.
But you're right. I think aside from that, it may be you and Teresa in different capacities, and I just hope that I'm doing justice to what you've all brought into the mix and the circle, and continue to honor your collaboration and contributions.
We can see the ingredients. We can see the ingredients, and it will nourish people.
Yes, that's the point. I mean, every time I look at what's happening in our world, I just want this to reach teachers and our students and our families ASAP. So trying to find the way that part of me that's so eager and on fire to give me enough breathing space to pace it to be effective. But it's time after I went to the IFS conference, I was like, it's time for us to grow. It's time, open up, folks. And after because it was when Dick commented on Chatty at the end of the second day, and Dick was saying, I didn't even know that people were bringing IFS into schools in the Middle East. And I'm like, Dick Schwartz, we're coming. We're coming. So yeah. All right, so please, I'll send the content of what was on there in an email. Respond, let me know if you please. I'd love to have you all continue to be guest speakers, facilitators, join in. If you have questions on structure, suggestions, just let me know so that we can make this a gift to our world. Okay, so I didn't create then space for the global updates. If you're sitting on something hot, maybe if you could be so kind to send that in an email to all of us, because I really want to pass it to Roger. John just shared this morning about this going to people in the Middle East. Fantastic, wonderful. So please join me in warmly welcoming our wonderful colleague, Roger. And thank you so much in advance for the amount of time and care you put into preparing for being with us today. Thank you so much, Roger.
Thank you all. Wonderful to be here. It's so fantastic to join this partnership, not collaborative, of all of us working together around the globe, because we all have this vision of just how wonderful it'd be in education, which is the foundation of society, to kind of help children, teachers' children, to be able to grow in this way. It's really so fantastic and heartwarming. And here you're from the U.S. to Australia and the Middle East, and it's just wonderful. So I guess today, the idea is to talk a bit about what we've been doing. I just joined this group fairly recently. Even though I was working on to fix in the council to kind of advance IFS in schools and doing a lot of work for years myself. So to fill people in a little bit in where I've been coming from in terms of the work that I've been doing and how I've been doing it, which might differ a bit from how some of it's been done by many of you. But that's what partnership is all about, different points of view. Generally, I'm still getting used to this Zoom business. And I really like speaking in person. When I speak in person, even though I'm really into technology in certain ways, I always shy away from PowerPoints because I feel it's sort of creates a barrier between myself and the audience I want to connect with. That being said, it just seems though I've got a bunch of things to say. It might be easier to just put it in a PowerPoint so it's more organized. I can kind of go through it. So therefore, I do have a PowerPoint to go through and to show a couple of things concerning some of the work that I've been doing. And hopefully we'll have some time for some questions at the end of discussion. So Joanne, I assume I can share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that all right? Let me just adjust this. Okay, so in terms of IFS in the schools, I do. Let me introduce myself a little bit more, who I am. I'm Dr. Roger Goddard, a clinical and consultation psychologist. And I work as a chief psychologist for the last 32 years at Trinitas Regional Medical Center in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is one of the largest psychiatric services in the state. I direct the APA accredited psychology internship there, the training program, as well as overseeing and supervising psychologists, interns, psychiatric residents at the hospital, doing a lot of different work. It's really an inner city hospital in Elizabeth, just about 20 minutes from New York City. I also, very early on in this 32 years of being there as chief psychologist, created and direct wellness management services, which is a consultation and training service where we go out to companies, schools, businesses, you name it, to do all sorts of training to help the organization achieve their goals and do better. So we've done a lot of work through the years in many different venues in many different ways. I would say that the most of our work, though, has been with the schools and working in the schools for many, many, many years, for quite some time. I have a private practice where I see adults, couples, families, and children. In terms of wellness management services, provides consultation to government agencies, police, city, state, federal government, community groups, etc. And some of our corporate and training services and trainings have included conflict resolution in the workplace, customer care, interdepartmental coordination, positive diversity in the workplace, discrimination, harassment training, customer value, communication service improvement, manager coaching, stress management, smoking cessation, change management, etc. But with the schools, we do things, a lot of different things, depending upon what's needed and what sort of programs we're helping them to initiate. And I work there with a team from my hospital that intervenes in the school. Particularly, the team consists of several of my psychology interns. And a lot of our work is really being able to help teachers to be better at their jobs, to be able to be more effective teachers, to help them to identify and deal with at-risk students who are having difficulties, who are struggling, and certainly to be able to achieve, overall help general students, gen ed students achieve better, more positive results in terms of where they're at. So our various programs have involved helping schools with or initiating programs, implementing programs that we can leave them with that involve student achievement, at-risk and special needs children, student success, teacher effectiveness and engagement training. I think about teacher engagement percentage that some teachers are really like, they're there and they're really enthusiastic and they've got everybody in the class talking and thinking and sharing. And, their engagement percentage is 90, 95%. Other teachers like talking to just a couple of students who are involved and maybe their engagement percentage is 5%. So really try to get teachers to use more of their personality, more of their joy in teaching, to be able to involve students, to really light a spark in them. Student behavior improvement, parent involvement, very, very important, very critical. Positive diversity, big issue for a lot of schools, restorative justice practices, all sorts of things like that. A little bit more about me. I live in South Orange, New Jersey. We're about 20, 25 minutes from New York City, where I grew up in Long Island, but lived in Manhattan for many years too. Grew up in the 60s, so I was very influenced by the Cultural Revolution and values at that time. Lived in the West Village of Manhattan for many years. My father had the travel bug. So he instilled in me the joy and the importance of traveling. So basically I've traveled the world a lot, and I think it's really really has created quite motivation in me to really embrace this kind of multicultural point of view that everyone, societies, people, countries, cultures do things very, very differently, see things very differently, experience things very differently, and to have such a joy and appreciation for those differences. And BTW, I love playing tennis. I'm a avid tennis player. Training and orientation, I received my doctorate from City University in New York, which was intensive training in psychoanalysis and object relations. But since that time, the training in almost every sort of approaches in psychotherapy, including CBT, DBT, systems, family work, transactional analysis, psychodrama, schema therapy, which all gave me a love for exploring the inner self and the mind. But however, all through, I was always very drawn to Carl Jung and Carl Jung's work, which really was a natural in terms of multiplicity of the mind to kind of turn me on to and really have developed a passion in me for the IFS work that Dick has really turned us all onto in terms of seeing our mind as consisting of the multiplicity. So I was very used to working with clients. I had some Jungian training, long time Jungian analysis myself. Very used to working with clients in terms of active imagination, talking to parts and chairs and different archetypal themes within themselves. So it was a real natural to make the transition once I began to learn about IFS. In terms of my IFS involvement, started many years ago, and I say I was kind of like drinking the Kool-Aid early on. I was hooked from the beginning, really loving it, really finding it so amazing that Dick has really given us something that, to me, in certain ways, is so simple and straightforward, but yet at the same time so profound, deep, and growthful, really wonderful. And so, so I started using it a lot, thinking about it a lot. I actually wrote a number of things, books and that sort of thing for IFS, and Dick has endorsed all of them. I'm so fortunate and delighted that he has done that, giving me warm endorsement for a lot of things. Recently just completed Ifs Toolbox, which will be kind of more or less in different areas, ways in which people can use and have different tools for being able to be on this IFS journey and explore themselves and get to know their parts and support their parts and their exiles and protectors, managers, firefighters much better, and to be in self more often in different ways. Did as many of you know about, the IFS teacher manual, and then complementary in terms of my work in the schools. I really feel very strongly it's very critical to involve parents in the same way, because schools, teachers just have kids for a while. If we can change the home environment, it's really helpful, because then children are exposed to different ways of thinking, to a belief in themselves and their potential in a different way than just a teacher in school doing it. So simultaneously developed the IFS parent manual to help parents to be able to use and think in this framework to be able to use IFS with their children and themselves. IFS deck of playing cards. I do a lot of couples therapy. I do, as I say, adult, child, family therapy, a lot of couples work. And at one point I was there doing couples work, and from an IFS point of view, saying to the couple, gee, it really seems like this is a high stakes poker game in which, you know, one person antes up with a particular part and the other person raises the ante, and I'll see that ante, I'll raise another ante. So it occurred to me, gee, wouldn't it be great to have, not only as a metaphor, but have a deck of cards where people can, and couples that are working on these things, to really see what parts are triggered in each other and press each other's buttons. Sometimes IFS is a very much a solo pursuit in certain ways. Obviously, we know more than that. It's really not, but it's very, very useful in terms of, you know, really tracing our reactions to other people, which is why it's so important, obviously, for all of us to help teachers with this particular perspective, because their parts get very triggered by students all the time, and then they put students in categories, or they end up being confined by their own parts. So it's very difficult for them to break free of that and teach from self. So we know it's very, very important. So with couples, developing this IFS deck of cards was very helpful for a lot of people in my work and couples, to be able to help them to, you know, see the ways in which we're triggered by other people, what kind of high stakes poker game we're playing. That way we can choose our hands better and kind of decide, well, what part do I want to play? Or can I play from my core self? Personal dedication, why I really got into and emphasized school training and school work. Basically, my view is that students and children are in intense need of help. I think we are undergoing an experiment in child rearing. I think never before in history have children been brought up by electrons, by all kinds of audio-visual stimulation, really 7 to 9 hours a day. Average child is watching and being bombarded by this. I think it's made children really overstimulated right brain skills at the expense of left brain skills. And that's great. We love right brain skills, body, kinesthetics, movement, everything, visuals, art. But to succeed in school and life, very often we need left brain skills. So I think children are at a disadvantage, and they really are lacking some key skills to be able to succeed in school and in life in many ways. Secondly, teachers are just overwhelmed, stressed out. The pandemic's only made that much worse. Student emotionality is very, very high now. Students are very reactive. They're very insecure, angry, frustrated, you name it. And that really gets in the way of their learning. And there's so many at risk, what I call fable students. As you'll hear, I really like to put things in terms of mnemonic devices, 3 to 5 step, 3 to 5 things to remember, to make things simple, straightforward, and usable as possible. So my initials, my mnemonic for students, at-risk students who are having difficulties, is that of students with fables, focusing, ASD, behavioral, learning, emotional, and social difficulties. A lot of children, as we know, are having those difficulties. Some of that has to do with the economics of various situations, all sorts of things that are going on nowadays, and they really need a lot. But schools are limited to how much resources they can really help those children with, which is the 5th reason that I've really been thrilled by and very passionate about doing the work in schools, because I think that the racism in our society really starts in the schools. That, as a foundation, institutional racism in the schools is very, very intense, because inner city schools in the US, I'm not sure about foreign lands per se. I doubt it's quite like this, but school funding is based on property tax. So it's really the richer your community is, the more money your school's going to have. So inner city schools have less money for schooling. And so consequently, they get short shrift, and there are all kinds of problems that become involved with that. So I really have a dedication, having worked a lot in inner city schools, to really being able to help children there and teachers there to be able to do their jobs better and feel better about that. This page is presented because it looks cool, and doing a template for PowerPoint. They come with these automatic different pages, and so I just couldn't get rid of this page. So this is a chart of basically nothing, but therefore our purview. Helping schools use IFS and become self-led. Well, parts of me, I have parts that are very idealistic, and I have parts of me that are very realistic. And my idealistic parts really want schools to be more caring, compassionate, values-based, from the heart, want schools to get away from competition, from teaching to the test, and emphasis on standardized testing, want schools to value what students are doing, not how they're doing. Maybe many of you are familiar with Alfie Kohn. He used to use this great analogy. Mayor Koch, is a mayor of New York City years ago, when he was mayor, going back some time, showing my age, would go around and say, "New York, how am I doing? How am I doing?" Well, Alfie Kohn uses this as a metaphor for teachers are so much, and schools are so much about how am I doing? When parents ask their kids, "How are you doing in school? Did you get an A on the test or a B on the test?" And Alfie Kohn says we miss the point of not how I'm doing, it's what I'm doing, what I'm learning, the joy of learning it. Really should be so much more front and center in schools. My idealistic parts believes that schools should use IFS because it's wonderful, lead to worldwide opening of hearts and minds. That there should be an emphasis on turning out caring citizens, not workers that can be plugged into the economy to maintain a classist society in which the gap between the rich and poor is forever widening and unjust. However, I also, having worked in the field for many, many years, have many realistic parts. And those realistic parts recognize that schools are under tremendous pressure to continually improve students' achievement, which is tied to their funding. See that schools must deal with a very conservative political situation that undercuts the financial needs of public schools and has great insensitivity to children and people in need. See that schools have key needs that correspond to capitalism and not to social democratic values. That teachers are fed up with the educational fad of the year that's followed, that they're made to teach, but then it's forgotten the next year. So they're burnt out, they're frustrated, they don't feel supported. My realistic parts believe that services need to be in alignment with the primary needs and objectives of schools, and that IFS, I firmly believe, can directly help schools achieve those goals, not just the idealistic goals, but really help with practical, straightforward, key goals that schools have. Which is one reason why I believe that it's very important to differentiate IFS from SEL. SEL now in the US, just about every state has mandated SEL learning content, core curriculum content requirements, but it's really paid lip service to. I don't think really educators, administrators, teachers really believe, as we believe, in the importance of social emotional learning. And so I think it's very good for us to position IFS as really helping with the core objectives of the schools, not just being one of 1,000 SEL programs. So getting buy-in from schools, getting schools interested in IFS, I believe that we need to align it, and I align it in my work to what schools really were trying to accomplish. 4 key goals that I believe schools have, that given my tendency toward mnemonics, use the mnemonic of the STAR key goals that schools have. And those involve S for student achievement, T for teacher effectiveness and enjoyment, A for at-risk student success, and R for rewarding and embracing diversity. So getting buy-in, if we kind of position it, and as I position it with schools, to be able to help administrators buy into these programs, use these programs, very, very important to be able to get that. And I guess it kind of differs a little bit that from what I hear from some of the other people using this approach. Maybe we're just at the infant stage of using the approach. But I see that a lot of us, and it makes a lot of sense, I totally believe in it, really want to start with the teachers and kind of buy into what I would call a little bit of the osmosis viewpoint that, well, if teachers are seeing themselves in this way and really being able to, be really come from the position of being self-led as teachers, as people, and using it in their lives, that it will trickle down, it will help the students to do it. That's wonderful. That's absolutely step one. I absolutely agree with that. But I do have the tendency to really think that better yet, if we can get the teachers to teach it to the students and get the students to actively use it, vocabulary, to have that framework, to use that framework, it'll be really more widespread through the school. So I really try to instruct teachers and give teachers a way to turnkey the approach, the framework, into being able to have students understand it and use it. So getting buy-in just in terms of the marketing sort of approach and marketing materials I might have in terms of using it. Certainly talk about the different STAR key objectives that schools have and that IFS can directly help with it. So some examples, well, in terms of helping the FABLE students that I mentioned, kids with focusing, ADHD difficulties, ASD difficulties, behavioral learning, social, emotional difficulties, very, very important. But one way in which I position it to teachers and schools is that that student emotionality is one of the biggest barriers to learning that there is. That student emotionality is very, very intense for students, very difficult. They get very reactive. They feel, I'm stupid, I'm dumb. They get frustrated by the work. What we expect them to learn is very, very difficult. And that basically our emotions run the show. And if the student emotionality tied to fight, flight reactions, stress reactions, fight, flight, freeze reaction, basically we know that when students are very emotionally triggered, their higher brain functions shut down. And it's really lower brain functions take over. And they're really not able to learn, to think straight, to listen, to take in certain things. And so IFS can really help us, obviously, with dealing with these parts of us that become activated and triggered, and help students to be able to deal with the emotionality that takes them over and makes it very difficult for them to be with, to learn. In terms of teachers, IFS obviously is a way that we all know can really help teachers to enjoy teaching a lot more, but also be a lot more effective when they're really being self-led or seeing the parts, children, they're not turning off the children, they're able to do things to teach with much greater, from the heart, much greater engagement, with much greater care, and really involve students in a good way. So helping schools to use IFS, steps and interventions that I use, basically I do it in 2 ways, informal, which is basically to integrate IFS into the other trainings that I'm doing, the other interventions, whether they be collective interventions and training, whether it's for teachers, for parents, for students, that basically all sorts of different ways it can do that, or individually or as a group. And then there's formal IFS training where and when the school is interested in using that as an approach to be able to integrate it in. So in terms of that, my discoveries in terms of working with schools is that training really needs to be ongoing and monitored. Research shows that when teachers really have an in-service, get a seminar and something, maybe it's even a week long or a day long or 3-day training or whatever, it's forgotten or not used within 3 to 5 days. That for me, in my experience in working with schools, really needs to be an intervention that's really part of the school year all the way through, and that's monitored, and that teachers are reporting back. Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? Is it being used in one way or another? So it really needs to be something that they can have access to on a regular basis, and not just a one-time training, or even for a period of time that really can be used all year long. As I mentioned before, I believe that teachers are really tired of the educational fad of the year sold by expensive consultants and abandon the following year. They put all this time and effort into it, and it really becomes very difficult for them. And thirdly, that really for teachers to really, use something, it's got to be, something's got to be in it for them. The IFM channel, what's in it for me channel. Teachers really need to realize that, that using IFS can make them feel so much better about their work, enjoy teaching so much more, be more effective, and really give them something. That's why also I very often will tie it into teacher stress management training. So very often it will be integrated into different consultations, individual consultations with teachers, parents, students, special staff, workers, or in general. And in terms of doing this, when it's an individual consultation, I think it's very important to have a 3 to 5 minute mini introduction to IFS, which becomes very important for someone to just basically get the understanding of it. Just met with parents, these two parents that are dealing with a child who is a 5-year-old. I met with them 2 days ago, and they're really not understanding this child. There's a question as to why he is having such trouble, being really out of control in class and school. So basically, I think it's important for us, for myself, to have an IFS elevator talk. As they say, if you're trying to sell a movie script, it's then you're traveling in the elevator up to the 3rd floor with the producers of the film to be able to speak to them very quickly about what it is. So basically, I inform people very quickly in terms of what this framework is about, how we can understand ourselves. We have little people inside who usually don't use the word people inside, but all parts are actually good, that some parts go on steroids, they take over, they become mission obsessed. They operate at the 95 to 99% level, but all parts are good. And that if they're cared for, they're supported, they're nurtured, they can really operate, go back to being the wonderful parts that they're meant to be and be so helpful. And that we also have a core self, of course, that really should be in charge and helping and healing everything. So I think it's very good to give people an understanding of the framework of IFS. So different people to work with in terms of it, as I've been mentioning, teachers, parents, students, I have my assistants work with them also, administrators, special staff is special services staff is very, very important. Special instance of being able to work with it because they're obviously working with children to do counseling, to do therapy, to do group work. And the more we can get them on board, very, very helpful, very, very wonderful. So 5 steps I use in terms of helping teachers, school staff, and parents use IFS is number 1, teach it to them, have them understand the perspective, the teachers themselves or the staff that's using it, then use it themselves, really kind of, have them employ it in their own lives, in their personal life, in their professional life, in their school life, and then to turn around and instruct students and children in using IFS, and then to use it with students and children, depending upon if I'm talking to parents or teachers, and then to use it in their life to kind of continue on and really delight in using IFS. Needs to be flexible, and some of in the IFS teacher manual, for example, sometimes in the teachers I'm working with or parents, maybe I won't talk about core self, maybe I'll call it the smart self or the wise self or even the power self, something like that. Parts sometimes I'll refer to for children who are younger and that sort of thing as moods or emotions to be able to help them to understand it if they really don't, it's difficult for them to understand certain parts, so it has to be flexible. Likewise, using IFS in inner city, urban, multicultural environments, I think it's very important to be adapted to that, which is to the environments I work in a lot. So issues often need to be out front and center there, are focusing on legacy burdens, racism, discrimination issues and parts that come up for children and teachers in those environments, helping teachers to use IFS to open up to challenging students and overcome stereotyping and turning off those students. I've had a lot of experience of teachers really being fed up and really being unsupported and feeling as though students just are not teachable. And, they're just, missing part for the forest, the part for the self, in terms of it, to really be able to use IFS to help them to see students very, very differently. Very often I see a lot of yelling and shaming of students that really needs to be addressed, and that IFS is a great way to be able to help them to realize what parts that will trigger in other people and students doing that. Empowering students to feel greater pride, worth, and importance in the inner city and urban environments, overcoming the experience of being marginalized and made to feel inferior, dealing with inner city issues, bullying, aggression, conflict resolution, very, very important to be able to help them to use IFS to deal with those things that they're encountering, not just in the school, but on the street, in their lives, all through. And then parenting issues obviously are very unique in those circumstances. So one key thing in terms of my work is to try to make it as accessible as possible. I think sometimes IFS can be very esoteric, vague, mysterious, maybe even cultish to some people, hard to understand. Right now, a lot of schools can't even do mindfulness meditation with students because some parents consider that, or community members consider that to be in some way spirituality or religious in some way. So I think one has to be careful of that. So I really try to create materials and that will help people to make it easy for them to understand, make it down to earth, mnemonic, just a few steps to be able to do, so that what is complicated, abstract, conceptual, esoteric, and spiritual in IFS can then be more understandable, helpful, enjoyable, practical, simple, and straightforward, and easy to remember and use. So in terms of that, I wanted to share a few of the materials I have just to give you a sense of some of those materials I use. So can people see that? Okay. So IFS Wellness Management Services marketing materials, just to give you a flavor of it. We've got different materials to go out there just as a kind of, get the door open to be able to talk to schools about using this sort of approach, whether it's to help students to overcome barriers to learning, help students who are at risk, having difficulties, helping teachers to be more effective and enjoy teaching more. And so some of the marketing materials are as such. And then from the teacher manual, as I'm starting to do it, that's step one in terms of turning teachers onto it to be able to help them to understand and use it. The IFS Teacher Manual Training Handbook for using internal family systems to improve teacher effectiveness and student success. What that involves first, as I say, go over what the benefits for teachers are, how it can help them to decrease burnout, the stress of teaching, and improve their self-nurturing skills, everything else to get the buy-in, to really let them know who can benefit from IFS. Again, going back to my tendency toward mnemonics, all people, all parts are welcome. Self-heals parts, that people having stress, emotional difficulties, love, financial, work difficulties, health, eating, anxiety, you name it, can benefit from IFS. And the 5 steps for using IFS with their students is for them to understand it and to try it and use it themselves, to teach it, to help individual students with it, enrich their lives with it. So in understanding it, my basic breakdown for teachers is we're all made up of parts. We also have a positive core self. Our protector parts battle for power and can often take us over, but all parts are good. And we have a core self that can really help to be a leader of these parts and help to really heal and cure and support our parts. And so go into explanation of that. By the way, the materials I have, quite great. As you can see, I'm throwing a lot at you right now in terms of different things that I use. Really want to make it as simple, straightforward as possible. So I will just take maybe a sheet or two, maybe 5 sheets or so, and kind of work on that at a time, not get to other things, just see what's relevant, make it as experiential as possible. So I've got that as background for some of the worksheets, some of the sheets to help teachers, students, parents, administrators, school staff, special staff people understand it, but I'm not throwing too much at them at once. Obviously, we all know that from experience that we can't overwhelm them with it. Go through common protectors they may have as teachers, letting them know what the protectors often are, perhaps rigid, bossy, fearful, anxious, untrusting, what the protectors need, how it can help protectors. Go over, of course, the 8 C's of the core self. Do different
Someone is at the front door.
do different parts mapping with them, what those parts may be, IFS in a framework, in a nutshell tool to kind of help them quicker. In similarity to the pause skill that Joanna has, and it's used, I have IFS Teacher Peace tool, which involves P for part awareness. What parts am I or my students having right now? What's coming up? Empathic care and question. How can I understand my own parts that are starting to come up in me, or the student parts? How can I begin to ask my student, gee, you seem to have a part of you that is feeling really uncomfortable right now, or really aggravated right now. Can you tell me more about that part? Or what's that part feeling? What's it thinking right now? Accessing one or more of our 8 C's to be able to get back into core self. creating solutions together. If we're working, teachers working with a student, how can you engage that student to be able to say, well, what does your part say about this? What do you say about this? What can we do concerning this? And then to E for to enjoy my calm, healing self-energy. So some materials I also use from the Ifs Toolbox I've mentioned, which has the different areas of tools. So for example, all day long self-energy tool, which is helping people to think about all day long, not just have once a day sort of thoughts about it, but all day long to be soft, ask for soft, loose, calm, relaxed muscles and deep breathing. E for enjoying the miracle of life. L for loving all parts, mine and others. And F for feeling the positive life energy. That if I kind of get people, guide them to kind of maybe put this in their pocket or plant a little seed in their mind to be able to help them to think about different ways of keeping being self-led throughout the day can be very, very helpful. Likewise, something like the Ifs Calm tool. C for being conscious of parts, mine and others. A, asking parts for the space to be in core self. L, loosen, release all body muscle tightness and tension. And M, making the most of this moment. Talking from our parts, not talking for our parts, not from our parts, helping them to understand the importance in Ifs that we all know about, that when people are talking from their parts and at each other's throats and really activated in a way in which it's just going to be triggering of other people versus I have a part that's kind of feeling this, that, or the other thing. It really helps the other person to be understood and have their parts be heard. Open space for the self tool, all sorts of different tools out of my head into my heart tool. So I'll go over different things for them. Ifs Psalm tool, just mentioned this, very often when people have parts that are inhabiting our bodies, which they do all the time and are in our bodies, sometimes in some people it's very good to have them really make the move to have the part, please sit alongside to the left or right of me. If we have a part that's particularly anxious, angry, agitated, aggravated, for students or teachers or whomever, if we have them sit to our side rather than be inside of us. When they're inside of us, they can eat away inside, they can hurt our health, our ability to feel good inside and be able to do different stuff. That can be helpful for us. So very often work with them to know that they can kind of ask a part to sit to their side, open up space. I talk in terms of partfulness meditation. As a word, it's a term that I use. I hope it comes into use because unlike mindfulness meditation, partfulness meditation, I think could be very helpful for people to see that they really can be there and meditate really by joining their core self energy to extend that to their different parts and to be able to have a campfire with the parts, be maybe by the ocean by the parts, to really be able to enjoy being with parts in a way that kind of reverses this whole tendency that we all have to kind of hate parts, dislike parts, want to get rid of certain parts. I mean, this, of course, we know is one of the most wonderful things. There's so many wonderful things about Ifs, but certainly the fact that, so many people go to therapy or think of getting help or just it's a house divided inside for so many of us that we hate these things and we just want to get rid of our depression, our anxiety, this or that. Like with Ifs, similar to Jungian therapy, this is the golden life. These are the diamond, the richness of life. This is the beauty of life, to really be able to help transform these parts. All parts are good. To be able to help people to embrace these parts, love these parts. Selffulness meditation, again, rather than mindfulness meditation, selffulness meditation, to be filled with self. I call this by many different names, blissfulness meditation, joyfulness meditation. Basically, I sometimes, just lost it. Sometimes have the thought that mindfulness meditation, as wonderful as it is for all of us, I really am into Hinduism, Buddhism, love meditation. But I think, having been in the Far East, learned meditation, Buddhism there, something has gotten lost in the Trans-Pacific shipment. And I really appreciate Dick's being able to point out that very often mindfulness meditation is done, as he calls it, I think he calls it, with a kind of passive observing stance. And I see that sometimes it's taught here as a secular stress management tool, as a kind of one becomes objective, scientific, distant, detached observer. And as Dick says, the idea, self can't see these things without loving these things, without extending love to these things. I think something's lost in the Trans-Pacific shipment of mindfulness meditation that we really need to help people to understand. That's all about loving the miracle of life. I mean, I think Thich Nhat Hanh, as of course, the Buddhist teacher, Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, really, is much more true to that sense of what mindfulness meditation can be and should be all about. And certainly in Ifs, to be able to help people to really extend love to everything that passes through our state of consciousness and our parts. internal guides. I may mention some of that in terms of how that plays into IFS. 6Fs, of course, so I'll have different materials for that. And then I'll mention this a little bit more. I'm sorry to be so rushing and getting this all in. There's a lot to cover and talk about. But we did this program with the preschool school district where I work. There are 40 preschool classes that I work with. And basically through the pandemic, it was hybrid classes where some children were in class, some children were attending from Zoom, WebEx at home and whatnot. And so we did with my assistants a 3-part training in terms of social emotional learning, IFS skills to help teach the preschool children, K and pre-K children, and kind of broke that down into 3 different areas, naming and describing my emotions, calming, helping, caring for my emotions, and solving my emotions problems, so that they're relating to their emotions as caring for them, as understanding them, being able to talk about them, being able to problem solve with them as parts. And we studied this and we got fantastic results. We did a outcome study on an evidence-based project and basically found that the 0.00001% significance, children after the program were able to really be able to use these skills to deal with their emotions so much better in class and at home. We surveyed both the teachers and staff. I have a little video clip of that, of my assistants talking about that program, what they did. Maybe we'll get to that. We'll see how time goes, but just to kind of clue you into that. But in any event, materials to help teachers instruct their students in IFS. So step 2 or 3 is to really turn from the teachers understanding it, using it, is to have teachers instructed. And so in the manual, I'll give them certain, just as I say, a couple of pages at a time to be able to teach, instruct their students in it. And so to be able to help them to do it, there's kind of outlines for instructing students in it, what to say to students, how to do it, and even IFS lesson plan, which complete with learning objectives, introduction, setting the stage, clearly defining the learning objectives, explaining to students what to do, using the IFS metaphors, teaching the main concepts, and then teacher modeling for the students what using this IFS is all about, and then keeping their students actively engaged, guided individual practice, and interactive and guided group practice, independent classroom homework practice, assignments, differentiation, teaching different students with different needs, different levels of understanding differently, and then giving assessments in terms of their skill and their understanding of the material and what they're doing. So really be able to help teachers in a step-by-step fashion to be able to impart it to teachers. And then to really encourage teachers to use it in their classrooms with students, to be able to have it in such a way that they can really use it in lesson academic content, really use it when there are problems that come up with children, in socialization issues with children, in understanding everything from math to history to social studies to current events, that sort of thing in terms of different parts and seeing things from that point of view, and for the teacher to be able to constantly use it in different ways. Then likewise, though, aside from having the class use it, understand it as a whole, there's also teachers to be able to help them to use it with individual students, at-risk students who are maybe having difficulties, behavior problems, emotional problems, that sort of thing. So there are different ways in which teaching students with it. There are also worksheets to be able to help students to identify parts in themselves, have good parts radar, use the core C's, how the core C's. There's a lot that help teachers and teachers with the students and students directly in terms of being able to be in core self in order to really enrich and enhance their learning and their ability to learn. Into worksheets. So a whole variety of student worksheets too, to be able to use it and do it. And then breaking it down for teachers to use it with individual students where issues come up. One-page tool for using IFS with a student. Identify your student's protector and your reactive part. Name it for your student in a caring way from your core self. Student is asked to help soothe or calm the part. Investigate what the part needs, wants, and fears. Guide your student to talk about the part to find a better strategy for getting what it wants. Help the student to use his or her smart self to feel better. And tune your student into the positive power of his or her smart self. So all kinds of different ways to be able to help teachers to use it on an individual basis to really help children in need. Likewise, in terms of working with counselors who are counseling students with it. Because so many students, they get turned off to school. What student is expected to learn is so monumental that they begin to feel, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I can't do this, I'm frustrated. and they end up really feeling as those parts take them over, and they end up turning off to school, having great difficulties with that. And then also giving teachers materials and also using materials for parents to be able to use it, guiding parents to use it with their students also. So to return briefly to the study that did evidence-based example of using IFS in preschool. As I mentioned, this was a video program, 3 different parts, video training to build IFS and emotional management skills in preschool children that was used during the pandemic and really given to remote classes. Teachers were to show the video at least 3 times a week, if not every day of the week, and then discuss it with children, have them use it, and then use it all during the day. And teachers were guided in terms of asking questions in those 3 different areas that we're trying to help students to develop the ability to use. As I mentioned, the area is number 1, naming and describing one's emotions, calming, helping, caring for one's emotions, maybe in the form of being like a teddy bear that they hold, they cuddle, they calm them down, and then problem solving with their emotions, with the difficulties. And then the set of questions that the teachers and parents were kind of directed to ask the children so that they could really think about using this and actually have practice in using it. Under the first, naming, describing my emotions, ask what emotions you're having today. Can you name your emotion? Tell me about it. What started your emotion, etc. Calming emotions. What can you do or say to the emotion to help it to calm down? Can you hug and hold your emotion like you would a teddy bear? Can you just sit and be with your emotion to help it to feel better? And then solving their emotions problems, asking the emotion what I can do to help you, that sort of thing. So really starting them down on the path of IFS sort of thinking. And so let me just share a clip from the results presentation that was done by my assistants on it, to just give you a flavor of it. And let me know, can people hear this okay?
Our talk on the Emotional Intelligence Skill Building Program at the Linden Schools. My name is Sarah Mullins and Julie Steele. So today we'll be talking about an intervention that we implemented in the Linden public school systems, the social emotional learning intervention. As you may know, social emotional learning is the process by which children learn to recognize their own emotions as well as the emotions of others. This helps them to build connections with others, to make decisions, and to approach challenges. Social emotional learning curriculums directly teach children appropriate actions and provide a safe environment for them to practice what they've learned. These skills help children to manage and regulate their emotions, manage their relationships, and their work more responsibly and more effectively. Preschool is a very important period in social and emotional development. This is the time where children are beginning to learn to identify and also to regulate their emotions. A recent research study tracked 753 kindergarten students for 2 decades and found that students who were more frequently able to identify their own emotions, as well as the emotions displayed by others in kindergarten, were more likely to be successful as young adults. Research also reveals that social and emotional skills interact with cognitive skills to enable success in school as well as in the workplace. So the intervention that we implemented in the Linden Public Schools was based on internal family systems. We'll be speaking about this more shortly. Using this framework of internal family systems, Dr. Goddard, who is our supervisor, created a curriculum targeting the development of social emotional skills for preschoolers and kindergartners. We implemented this during remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. So given the constraints on in-person learning, we adapted this curriculum for remote implementation. So a little bit more about internal family systems, or IFS. IFS views us as consisting of multiple parts. We have parts that act to protect us. These are called our managers. Parts that embody our emotional wounds, otherwise known as our exiles. Internal family systems stipulates that all parts are good, and they're trying to help us. But at times they might become extreme and act in ways that are actually unhelpful. Internal family systems believes that we also have a core self, which should serve a leadership role, a caring role, and a healing and a problem-solving role. Our core self is often sidelined by these parts that can become extreme. Internal family systems views good communication between our core self and our parts as something that enables us to solve problems, resolve heart and emotional difficulties, and lead successful, positive lives. IFS can help improve student success. Emotions are one of the most common and most intense barriers to learning. Children today, they can feel things, and they can feel things very strongly and intensely. When students feel frustrated, angry, nervous, insecure, sad, restless, self-conscious, or any other emotion strongly, it is possible they could become emotionally dysregulated, and their capacity for learning could decrease. Children, adults as well, are most often not explicitly taught how to deal with and how to manage these intense emotions. IFS can help children to deal with their emotions, to cope with their emotions in a positive and effective way. When parts or emotions control students' capacity to learn and succeed, as mentioned, it can decrease. When students are taught how to identify or deal with their emotions or their parts, and their core self, their wise, their smart self is in charge, their capacity for learning and achievement and success has the potential to increase. So this is kind of the framework in which we base our intervention. So the goal of our study, the goal of our project was to determine the feasibility and the effectiveness of our social emotional learning internal family systems program, which we implemented remotely for pre-K and kindergarten students at the Linden Public Schools in New Jersey. So our hypothesis. So we hypothesize that students who participate in this program will demonstrate increased emotion identification skills, increased emotion calming skills, increased emotion problem solving skills. And we'll get a bit more into each of these areas as we continue on in our presentation. So the procedure for our intervention. So we started off by giving out initial assessments. Both teachers and parents completed initial online assessments of either their student or their child's emotional intelligence skills before we began our program. We then implemented 6 weeks of video lesson curriculums. So we'll speak more about the content of these videos, but teachers were encouraged to play the videos, which are about 10 to 15 minutes in length, at least 3 times a week. And there are 3 separate videos that were played on a rotating schedule. Parent and teacher coaching was also a part of our intervention. So parents and teachers were encouraged to ask a set of questions that reinforce the skills taught in the videos that were played at least 3 times a week. Finally, we had a post-assessment that came after our intervention. So similar to the initial assessments, teachers and parents completed an online assessment of the student or their child's emotional intelligence skills after the program. Materials. So we're going to get into describing some of these videos for you. And before we do that, we want to explain a bit about how all of these videos started out. So to introduce the students to the videos, we started out with a song. So I will play that for you. All of my emotions talking about emotions, I really should. Emotions can make video. It was to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It incorporated hand gestures as well, and students were given a script that they could follow. And this introduced every single one of the videos.
And just to jump in, we'll get to results later, but anecdotally, teachers commented that the song was one of the students' favorite parts of the video, so they really liked it.
All right. So the first video was all about naming, describing, and identifying emotions.
Let me skip ahead then to see if they have a clip of the one of the videos that they did.
Fine. Sometimes I feel happy, and other times I feel sad. Sad is a word that we use when we feel down, disappointed, tired, upset, or missing somebody. Sometimes we can feel sad when something stops us from doing what we were looking forward to. I felt sad when my friend moved away, when my ice cream melted, and when my sister hurt my feelings. Moo, what makes you feel sad? I feel sad when I lost my favorite toy. That would make me feel really sad too. When I feel sad, I notice the corners of my mouth pointing down into a frown. My eyes start to feel heavy, and sometimes I feel like I want to cry. When I feel sad, my body feels weak, and I bend over. Friends, can you think of a time that you felt sad? What changes happened in your face and in your body? Teachers, you can pause the video here. So as you can see, that provided students with a definition of the emotion, potential situations that could elicit the emotion, as well as examples of changes that might occur in the face and the body.
Okay, I'll stop that there. Give me just a second. There's more to the video, obviously, in terms they go on to describe the results that we got. As I say, at the 0.0001% level of significance in terms of children being able to describe and deal with their emotions much better, which was pretty astounding, pretty good, and to be able to show those skills. So just final words I have. I just have a very deep belief in IFS as a gift of healing and growth. So many people have trauma in their lives. From my Jungian perspective, I view life as a hero's journey to discover and fulfill our life's mission. However, the hero-heroine's journey has many bumps in the road, fire-breathing dragons, descents into hell, getting stuck in the belly of the whale, and life-threatening events. The hero must develop the skills to overcome immense obstacles in order to succeed in the life quest. IFS enables us to heal and grow. It's helped me for years with the hardships and difficulties I've endured. Obviously, we all owe Dick tremendous gratitude for his gift and tireless work. Now I'm using IFS to overcome one of the greatest traumas one could endure, the loss of my 32-year-old daughter 10 months ago. IFS has helped me to support and heal my devastated parts. It's my hope that through all of our efforts, we can bring this wonderful tool to all those who suffer in our world to help them to live the lives they deserve. Thank you all for your support and for the work that each of you has been doing for so long. It's wonderful to share IFS as a tool for helping others at such a deep and profound level. So, as I said, it's really been a help for me. Been using it for many, many years, and even under these very difficult circumstances, really a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I'd like to ask people questions, thoughts you may have, or just discussion of some of the things. I know I threw a lot at you in terms of different things I've done, but it's been a lot of years of using and dealing with IFS in so many different ways. So just wanted to give people a flavor of that. So any questions or thoughts or discussion?
Roger, my heart goes out to you.
Thank you.
I am so grateful and glad that IFS is out there and you're finding it healing to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a very devastating thing. It was a fairly sudden thing, not super expected. She had a lot of GI issues and I'd been in the hospital this time last year. Seemed to be doing okay. In March, she went back in and just had organ failure and we lost her. It's terrible.
Oh, it is so hard to even talk about anything else at this moment because it just like so takes over, but I'm going to push that. That was one of the most incredible talks I've ever heard. I know I am highly enthusiastic about life, but truly every single slide on there made me want to just kind of really spend a long time with it. And I want to buy everything that you have. So I have a very practical question is how can I buy your materials? Because you have put together things in such an incredibly beautiful way. And I just know I could learn a lot from it and be a better psychologist.
Thank you.
Is there an easy way to buy your materials?
Yeah, most everything is being sold in the IFS online bookstore as a physical book. The IFS teacher manual, parent manual are there for us to use and share. The deck of cards, I'm having a little trouble with my printer right now, getting the deck of cards. Deck of cards going again, but they should be back there. I'm just finalizing the toolbox. Dick gave me that the good endorsement for it, so I'll be getting those over to the store in a few weeks.
Okay, so
and then also Amazon. There are digital versions, PDF digital versions on Amazon that you can also access.
Okay, so everything we can buy at this point, we can go through IFS or Amazon.
Right.
And the other things you're working on producing.
Right. Or if you need particular pieces of that stuff or you're interested, I could send you PDFs of it.
And I really want to give you our entire global time. You should have all 4 of ours. That was just so beautifully put together and clear. It was both so rich and so clear. I am just amazed and really, really thrilled.
I appreciate that. My fear is of overloading people with all that information stuff, as I say, and also PowerPoint. Never like to use that when I'm, face to face with people because I'd rather.
You gave us an overview today. You allowed us to see the breadth of what you're doing and how you've taken, this model of IFS and really clearly articulated it for a variety of populations. You did a beautiful job on letting us get to know who you were. So it made sense for all of the ways that you integrated, for instance, diversity education or your aspect about mindfulness. I just thought was mind-blowing. It really helped me understand why I've had difficulty with my own practice because I think I've been doing that objective thing a little bit too much, And so, yes, I think your introduction to who you are made just helped me understand what you chose to do and why you were able to do these things at such a deep level.
Thank you.
I could go on and on, but I'm just so thrilled and I'm so sorry. And anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello. First of all, we're so sorry for your loss, and it was all moving. I mean, what you shared with us. Thanks for sharing this anyway.
Thank you.
And the whole rest of the presentation was really very exciting and made us want to do a lot of things. All these things are already there. So thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Appreciate it. you're working. I mean, I've obviously had IFS therapy before, but working with an IFS therapist now, that's been really helpful in terms of dealing with the sorts of devastated, traumatized parts that come about with a loss like this. So I appreciate all of your sympathy for it. Thank you.
If I may, I will say that I'm struggling to scale the two things. I think about your loss and I think, okay, then everything else is over here on the side, and yet we're here to talk about this stuff that's over on the side. So please know that that's what is true for me, and I just feel for you and for where you are right now.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. In terms of the presentation, two really, really concrete things from a teacher's perspective, and in particular, a teacher who works on the back end of this narrative, and that I'm working with adult students who have already risked and lost. So you hear the at-risk terminology all the time. My folks have already been through that path. They've already risked and lost, and that's why they're with me. And so I work on the debris field side of things. It's, for me, it's a nice fit and it's a lovely experience. And seeing that song and those skills taught at the preschool level, I will absolutely 100% guarantee that that will break the chain in the experiences of my students in their lives, guaranteed.
Wow.
By the time they get to me, they have, number one, no vocabulary for what they've experienced and what they are currently experiencing. Number two, there's no infrastructure on the inside of them for processing what's going on. Yeah. And so there's no way to have anything other than this sort of permanent hurricane state that's just buffeting them around at all times. And so to have that brought to them at a very early age, even if the external world is not going to relent in terms of how it's treating them, they will have something on the inside. And so that's absolutely fabulous. Right. And then another thing that's really concrete is we in the group have talked many, many times about starting with the adults in the system, right? So we're going to start with the teachers, we're going to start with the parents, we're going to start with the administrators and do that. And you've actually added a brand new perspective for me. And I'm going to speak about this from a teacher's viewpoint. You made a comment about teaching this to the kids. So there's this osmosis experience going on, right? So there's this top-down thing, plus there's a bottom-up osmosis that's happening. Right. I will say that one of the things that's really common for me, I can't speak for everybody else, is that we bump into the protector parts of the teachers as we're presenting to them. When we present the work from the viewpoint that they're the ones with the larger issue, that the kids have the smaller issues, the adults in the system have the larger issues. And so the protector parts pop up and it becomes the sort of mud that we have to work through to get to deeper self, and it slows the process down. And I also think that because we have the teachers quite often for very limited amounts of time, that lack of buy-in right off the bat, because the protectors are up, means that the impact does not get to be dispersed amongst the students. But your statement of saying, have them teach it to the students, it rang a very big bell for me as a teacher, because here's the thing that I secretly know, that when I teach stuff to my students, and I'm not really good at it yet, by teaching it to them, they make me get better. Mm-hmm. And in particular, by watching them embody it and use the work, they make me get better. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big inversion of this principle for us in a way. So thank you for that. That's super important. And it allows me to bypass the teacher's protector parts and let them know, yeah, you can teach a lot of these ideas in the classroom and it's going to work beautifully. And then they'll osmosis it up. They'll pick it up osmotically from their kids. That's really, really good. So thank you for that. Great.
Delighted to hear that. I really appreciate that, because, there's been a lot of, and then working to fixed board, there's been a lot of studies and emphasis in first initial things, really wanting the teachers to be able to embody it and use it I like the idea of like, let them teach it to the kids and really learn it as they teach it.
I know because I'm working with parents, right? My folks are the parents who are problematic for the kids who are problematic in schools today. And so my job is to shift that narrative inside my classroom so that it has an impact in the lower K-12 system. And what I know is that a lot of my parents have not gotten to the point where there's enough self on board where they're doing it because they see their own value initially when they first get into the class. After they've been with me for a while, the self rises up and it rules the day. But in the beginning, the one thing that they will do is they'll do better for their kids. And they always say, I want to do better for my kids. I want to do better for my kids. And so what I'm certainly convinced of is that teachers are pseudo parents in that regard in the classroom. We want to do better for the kids too.
Yeah.
So by having the kids pick that up, we'll look at ourselves and go, oh, I should do this too. I should do this too.
Yeah.
So yeah, points for you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I want to just step in for a moment, just acknowledge time. I know it's 1:33, so people need to leave. We understand. I know Julie already left a message. How about we stay on? Is it okay, Roger, 5 more minutes if other people have questions or comments?
Oh, absolutely. I'm delighted to. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll stay for 5 more minutes, but if you need to duck off, we understand. So what else? Erica? Oh, Erica was saying bye. I see. Okay.
Oh, Roger, I've been wondering about you because you've come on this call, and I've been meaning to look up more about your work because you obviously have been doing this and bringing it. So I'm glad to know more about you. And again, so sorry for your loss. And just the word courage comes to mind for me, of how you keep going. And that's separate from your 9 years of analysis, which is also, that kind of depth. So thank you for all of this. And I'm one of the people that I was working with a psychiatrist now at Office of Mental Health who's putting together a social emotional curriculum for kids, particularly around culture and identity. And I'm wondering, well, that's one piece. And then also there may be some opportunity to engage more with childcare providers. And I'm wondering if that video if I could borrow that or see that sometime to share with my colleague as we're kind of building things.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Let me get that to you.
Yeah.
Email me, put my email in the chat, and
Okay.
Well, you probably know it from the have it in the common emails that we're getting. Yeah, I should be able to do that.
What she's doing is like statewide, so it really can have a huge impact. And I agree with this, that like if we can get our kids to know this stuff. My daughter, when she was in preschool, they had a chime, which was a little, we bought one for her. Like, I can't remember now, but she called it a chime. Anyways, at night we would sit like on our bed and do like a minute of the chime exercise. So much so that when ours broke, she actually, I believe, took it from the preschool after she had left preschool. I was like, Eva, how did you get that? She goes, oh, Nana and Papa bought me another one. No, they didn't. Anyway, she stole more than that from her preschool. She carried it with her.
Great.
Caused some controversy at the school. Teachers were going at each other. Who stole the teacher box? Anyways, we finally
the preschool stuff. The preschool stuff I really value. I think it's great, as you're saying, such a foundation. But I do think in my work, the middle school and high school students really need this stuff. At the time where it's so hard for them in terms of their egos being, the competition and everything. That's another time where it's so essential.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I'm curious, I have a big question, so I've sort of been sitting on it. I'm not sure how much we get into it now, but I'm just sort of curious with all the exquisite elements that you've developed, if you've a form of a roadmap or a journey that a whole school can go on? And have you engaged with whole schools over a period of time to kind of see them be transformed in terms of being self-led schools?
Right.
Thoughts or experience with that?
Real eager to do that. I'd say, parts of schools, because my contracts generally deal with a certain grade level, in this case, preschool, other cases, the fifth graders, so it's been parts of schools, not the entire school, which is what makes me so excited about working on To Fix Foundation Council to try to do it. Right now we're thinking about, well, how do you create a model school for having the whole district go self-led? So, the steps would be there. Certainly, I probably tend to base it on the manual that I have and the steps in the manual, but I would love to see that. It would just be so good. And, as I think I mentioned here, I mentioned there a lot too, if we can in some way have a way to be visual in filming it. So we get the, people talking about what it's like to go through that and have their school be that way, to be able to market or see, or for other schools to really see what it can do for an entire district would be wonderful. But no, I myself have not done an entire district.
Andy, and then let's wrap up.
Yeah, so Roger, thank you. This was just a magnificent presentation. And I'm really moved by how in caring for others with your work and sharing your wisdom with us, you're constantly in this giving, caretaking role while juggling the needs of taking care of yourself, especially over this really critical year. So really, I'm honored to have been able to bear witness to all of this today. For me, I really feel that the power of what you're talking about is, that dropping of the pebble in the pond and the ripple effect. And I'm really curious, when you get your school district or your specific contracts engaged, how the parents are brought into the process and to what degree the greater community is invited. Because I really feel with some of these tribal kinds of reactions that we're having, our districts experiencing, like in board meetings, I'm really wondering how you manage that and kind of take the threat. You had mentioned language. I think that's really important, removing some of the perceived threat language-wise. But if you just have anything to comment on that, I'm really curious.
Yeah. A great question. Different ways, different times, not to community so much, but certainly extending it to the parents. I feel so critical. In any work I'm doing in the schools, I really feel parents need to be involved. And basically the most common, the easiest answer to that is that really try to evolve a weekly training support session for parents, for teachers, for special service staff, so that constantly doing something. And now with Zoom, it's much easier, but sometimes when I've been kind of face-to-face there, to have something bi-weekly at worst, but something that, as I say, has to be ongoing. So to be able to invite all parents, special needs parents, different groups of parents, teachers per se, in terms of stress management for teachers. But basically it's that weekly format, bi-weekly at the worst case scenario, where it really grows, that ripple effect as you're talking about that. And I feel is a very strong way of doing it, to kind of keep enlarging it.
Wonderful. And I appreciate that with each of these questions, as we're curious to delve into your work, we could probably dig for an hour with one of these topics, which I think Julie acknowledged right up front, that you kind of said, here is the massive buffet of all the things, and oriented us to this universe of what you've created. So it seems that we share very much in our profound gratitude for everything you've shared today, your life dedicated to this work, your expertise, your skill, your generosity. And I sincerely hope you do feel encircled with our love, gratitude, and compassion for you at this moment in time.
Thank you.
So we will wrap it up for today, but maybe we can, in response, thank you, and thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's such a privilege to be part of this group. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're so grateful you've joined us in the circle. So for now, we're going to plan to join together next for the forums that are being hosted in January and into February. I'm extremely interested and excited by what Danielle and Kenna have been discussing around diversity and identity. So I just want that to have its proper seat. So maybe we look at that happening later in February or early March. And in the meanwhile, I look forward to hearing from any and all of you with regard to your interest in participating in some of the upcoming events that I listed at the beginning as well. So thank you and have a happy holidays and be well.
Bye.
Opens.